Buenos dias, Kim Ho Leung here, and I welcome you from the Oro Verde, the green lush. I hope you are enjoying your day. I'm coming to you from the Andean Mountains, and we are in the final stretch of the rainy season. And it's amazing, everything is so lush and so green, and there's so much energy here. Just love it. Today I like to share something about stories. We hear stories each and every day. From our childhood on, we listen to fairy tales. We heard stories about our family. We even watched stories through movies. And we were taken in on a little adventure, taken away far to other lands, right? What is the function of stories in our lives? I can mention a few. Not only do stories inspire us, they give us a sense of direction. They give us hope and faith. And also they can even guide us in our own life story. Stories can give us comfort and even consolation. I remember I heard a story by Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, the great storyteller. He shared a story about Native Americans. And in that culture, storytelling is essential. It's basically a necessity for survival. Because in those days, they were living in tribes and they were staying on certain plains. And when there was no food, they had to move. They had to find other places to find food. That was a harsh reality. And one way to cope with that harsh reality was storytelling. So when they sat together, the elderly sharing their stories to their children and to their grandchildren, there was a knowing arising, there was a warming up from the inside out, and that gave them solace, I guess, and courage and faith that life is benevolent. I like to share one of my favorite stories of all time. And the reason is that it's so inspiring to me. It kind of reflects my own life. And perhaps it will resonate with you too. I'd like to invite you to open your heart, open your mind, open your spirit, and let it all in. And perhaps this story will give you ahas or insights or a resonance from the inside out. Perhaps a recognition in your own life. I think that's the beauty of stories. Stories, they mimic our own life. They are a reflection of our own life. And by knowing this, by stepping into this consciousness, we can find meaning and purpose on a daily level. So are you ready? I fold my hands together because my favorite story, one of my favorite stories of all time, is the story on the life of Buddha. So, once upon a time, in a land far away called India, there was this kingdom ruled by a king in wealth, in abundance, in security and comfort. And in this kingdom, a baby was born, and this baby was called Siddhartha. And when the baby was born, it was striking because the baby was radiant, had all kinds of angelic features. There was something really special about this baby. So the king was very proud. So when there was like a baby shower, everyone stood in awe in a circle around the baby. Then a man came down from the mountain, and this man was Asita. And Asita was a hermit and also a seer. And it was very, very rare that Asita would come down the mountain because people hadn't seen him for a very long time. So when Asita came, they welcomed him. And Asita went straight to the baby. He held the baby. He looked into the eyes. And there was a silence. Tears were welling up and dropping on the cheeks of Asita. The king and the queen were very worried. What is going on, Asita? Is he okay? Is he healthy? And Asita replied, No, everything's fine. I'm just saddened by the fact that when this child, this baby will start his teachings, that I won't be around anymore. And he gave a prophecy. Asita told the king and the queen that this soul will become either the greatest king that have ever lived, or the greatest sage, the greatest wisdom teacher that will ever live. Filled with pride, the king couldn't hear the second thing about being the sage. He only listened to the first phrase, the greatest king of all. So it filled his heart with even more pride, and he held his baby and said to Siddhartha, one day you'll be the greatest of all. So Siddhartha grew up as a very special child. It is said that after a few days he could already walk. And when he was a toddler, he was already learning from his mentors and teachers, but in a few days he was already finished because he already knew everything. So he grew up in this royal palace. Actually, there were many palaces, each for different season, one for the dry season and one for the rainy season. So he grew up, and everyone is in awe of his beauty and his wisdom and the radiance Siddhartha beamed out into the world. So when he was a teenager, he was sitting at the court and he kind of got bored. He knew everything. He had the best food ever. There was always beautiful people around him, beautiful girls singing and dancing for him. So he was kind of bored because this was his daily life between the palace walls. And then he asked a musician to sing him a song to let him forget about, the everyday dullness. So this musician sang a song, rather a different song, about the life beyond the palace walls, about a song about the real life. And it sparked something in Siddhartha. He felt like, wow, is there really something else beyond the palace walls? I have to check out, I have to go out there. So he requested his father if he could go out on a trip outside the palace walls. And his father was so proud, was so filled with joy and excitement, because finally my son is ready, he thought, to go into his future kingdom and to meet his people. So everything was set. The king and his staff made sure that everything that was ugly and dirty was removed from the streets, because this day, the first day that Siddhartha would step out of the palace walls, would be a day of a big feast. So Siddhartha went there, and he was in awe. He was surprised to see all these people waving at him, and there were a lot of celebrations going on. But then he saw something that really shook his heart. In the crowd, he saw a man, and this man was sweating and he was all pale. Siddhartha had never seen an ill person, so he asked Channa, the caretaker of his horses, Channa, who is this man who is sweating and looks so pale? And Channa replied, that's a sick man. A sick man? What is illness, Channa? So Channa explained that some now and then people get ill, get sick, and when they get sick they suffer a bit. And Siddhartha was awestruck by it, and he was very shocked actually. So when he returned to the palace, he retreated to his room and he needed time to think. He planned a next trip. So the same rituals, everything was cleaned. That sick person was made sure that he wasn't there anymore. So they went out. Siddhartha and Channa and the whole entourage. And again, a day of celebration. But in the crowd, Siddhartha looked at a person that was very old, had wrinkles in his face, gray hair, was crooked, and he was standing there. And it immediately caught the eye of Siddhartha. So he asked Channa, who is this man who looks so pale, has wrinkles in his face, his body not that strong anymore? And Channa answered, that's an old man. He's at the end of his life, and when people get old, the body changes. And Siddhartha had never seen an old man in the royal court, so he was shocked again, even more shocked. So when they retreated back to the palace, he isolated himself to ponder what he had seen. Shortly after, there was a third trip, and there he encountered a dead person. He was totally blown away by it, that he went back and isolated himself in his room and didn't show him for many, many days. His well-being started to deteriorate. He became pale. He refused to eat because he was pondering and reflecting on the three people he saw. His parents were very worried. And then one day it dawned on Siddhartha that the call to purpose came to him. He had to find the end of suffering for humans. So he requested his father to leave the palace and go search for the answer to this question. His father was furious because his father was still filled with pride and saw his son as his heir, as a very powerful king. And yet, my son, he will embark on this adventure of spiritual growth? I don't think so. So his father forbid Siddhartha to leave the court and to never mention it again. That same night, a mysterious mist evolved around the palace court. All the people went to sleep, like in hypnosis. Not Siddhartha, he was awake. So he knew this was his chance to break out, to leave the royal life behind and go on his quest. He waked up Channa, his friend and horse caretaker, and together with their favorite horse, Kantaka, they went. After some hours, he told Channa, I have to do it by myself, dear one. So can you return Kantaka and notify my family and the royal court that I have embarked on my vision quest? Channa, in tears, could not stop him. So he obeyed and he went back. Siddhartha met a man dressed in rags, and he asked his man, can we exchange my costume, my clothing for what you're wearing? Because I need such a clothes when I'm living outside. So this man didn't believe what he heard. So he very willingly exchanged his rags for this royal costume and the gold and the fine materials. And there Siddhartha went into the forest. There he met a group of men with whom he started doing meditation for 7 years. And the group of men were very surprised to see this man and also very admiring him, because Siddhartha was doing this meditation immediately. He didn't eat, he didn't drink, so he became sort of a skeleton, flesh over bone. But this meditation practice bring him the answer, bring him the end of suffering for humanity? No. So one day he stood up and his body was all what I said, he was like a skeleton, he was all dirty, and he went to the river, but he could barely walk, so weak his body had grown. At the river there was a young woman who had a bowl of milk, and she was looking at him like she was seeing an angel or a spirit. So she offered the bowl of milk to him as a blessing, as an offering. Siddhartha drank the milk and his body regained the strength again. The group of men witnessed this ritual and they were very disappointed in him because they thought that Siddhartha had lost his way. So disappointed, they left him, leaving Siddhartha all alone. So Siddhartha was sitting one day at a river, and there was this boat, And there was this musician, and this musician had a string instrument. And he was listening to the song, but also observing the instrument. And then he realized the power of the string. When the string is too tight, it will snap. When it's too loose, you cannot make music. So there was his realization of the middle way, or the middle ground. And his further observations were that he saw all suffering happening. Insects being eaten by birds, birds being harmed by birds of prey. He was so fed up of all the suffering. And then he regained his purpose, he regained his energy and power. And then, the legend says, he went to sit under this tree, the well-known Bodhi tree. And he closed his eyes and he started to meditate. And this, in his story, is the most crucial phase of the transformation of Siddhartha, because he was confronting his inner demons. He confronted Mara, the lord of his own ego. And Mara tried to seduce him with beautiful young girls, with fire and thunder and horrendous rain. But nothing could disturb Siddhartha anymore, because he was aligned from the inside out. So he withstood the storm of Mara, and Mara surrendered. And at that moment, Siddhartha became enlightened. He became Buddha, which means the enlightened one. So I hope this story sparked some inspiration in you. Perhaps you recognize yourself what Siddhartha was going through, the call to leave his comfort zone, the call to find the answer to the end of suffering, the adventure he went on, the exchange of his clothes, the change of identity already. He not only gave his clothes to this man, this wanderer, he became a wanderer. He had beautiful long hair, and he cut his hair. And there he sat, finally, to confront Mara, the lord of his own ego. And he not only conquered it, but he transcended it. So at the end of that story, he returns to the community that he left behind, and he already started his new teachings, a new consciousness, the principles of Buddhism. So again, how can this story resonate in your life? How can the transformation of Siddhartha into Buddha possibly say something about changes or transformations you are experiencing in your life? Thank you for watching, and I look forward to see you in the next video.